Welcome to a new episode of the ACG Alumni Podcast, From Classroom to Career. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Ed Wingenbach, the new president of the American College of Greece. He started in July and was inaugurated just this last Saturday at our fabulous 150th anniversary celebration. I'm Alison Townley, and I'm the Vice President of Advancement, and I'm looking forward to engaging with Dr. Wingenbach and letting you all understand a little more about who he is as a person and as a leader and a visionary for our next 150 years. Welcome, Dr. Wingenbach. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Can I call you Ed?
Of course.
All right, good. That's better. All right, so I know you're an athlete and you're a runner, so let's start with a warm-up.
Athlete is very generous.
So to warm up the conversation, we'd really love to get to know a little bit about you and your routine. So how do you start your day, and is running still part of it, or what do you like to do to start your day here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try to get up early enough to get some exercise before I head into the office, and this is a great place for that. I mean, I love running outside. I love running on the hills, and so I'd be able to alternate between, depending how I feel, I could go down and run on the track, do a couple miles there, or we've had a gate installed behind the president's house so that I can go out and go trail running, which is my preferred way to run. You get up and see the views. You can see the Parthenon and the Lycabettus Hill and the Aegean Ocean from the first corner as we run up there. The other thing I've picked up since I moved here is swimming. Now that I'm getting a little older, it's better on the joints. And so I'm alternating. I'm doing swimming 2 or 3 times a week in the beautiful, beautiful pool here. And because I'm not really an athlete, I'm just an exerciser, I stay away from the Michael Phelps lane. And, I know my place. So.
Good. Well, I mean, I'm glad that you've already kind of dug in and discovered one of the many things that's so unique about our school, and it's just the beautiful setting. And when I travel around the world telling people about our school, it's hard for them to imagine just how unique this setting is in the Imatos Hills and in our Olympic pool.
It's a pretty extraordinary place.
That's great. Great. So I also understand that you like to cook. I had the great fortune to have sat at the table the other night at the dinner before your inauguration with your son and Susan, your wife, and even Dr. Horner. And he was asking Thalen, your son, if he knew how to turn on the toaster yet. Because I think in 17 years that Dr. Horner lived in that house, he never turned on the oven. And Thalen was quite impressive with his knowledge of how the kitchen works.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about cooking and why you enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, cooking for me is sort of my version of meditation. It's the way I relax. I like the creativity of it. And so, my preference, and this is great in Greece, but my preference had always been, from the time I was a professor 20 years ago in California to now is, go to the store, find things that look good, that look fresh, what's great in the meat cabinet, and then go home and lay it all out and play with it, right? And make something interesting. And one of the things that's been, but one of the great, it wasn't really a surprise, one of my favorite things so far about Greece is the extraordinary quality of the produce and the meats and there's a place my son's at ACS, and so there's right across the street from picking him up, there's a fruit and vegetable stand next to a bakery, next to a great fish shop, next to a butcher, right? And you could just go in and just see all the beautiful local produce and then go home and relax and make a beautiful dinner. And then get back to work. So
yeah, that's one of the things that's really nice about Greece, unlike America, where we tend to go to the supermarket and just every day picking up fresh stuff. So
yeah, well, and you can see it in the health of the country. All of us feel a lot healthier since we've been here in the last couple of months. So
that's great. So on that topic, tell us a little bit how the transition has been for your son and your wife. How has it been as a family to make this big move?
It's been really great. I mean, the idea of making a move like this, going from the United States to Europe, from America to Greece, to a place with a different language and a very different culture, you don't get very many opportunities to do something like that in your life. And so when we were given this opportunity, or we were invited to do this, that was kind of the question. Like, well, if we don't do this, you'll never have a chance again. And so that adventure of totally changing our life is still exciting. It still feels very new. I think for my wife, she's always been interested in traveling and going to other cultures and societies. And she took our older daughter, who's in college. They spent 4.5 months in Guatemala and Mexico when my daughter was maybe 12 to kind of make sure that her Spanish skills were strong. And so, this fits with our sense of how we want to live as a family, how we want to raise our children, but also the opportunity to try something entirely different. I think you should always, when you get those opportunities, you should always say yes to them if you can. So I feel very lucky. This is what I tell students, by the way. I was speaking to our study abroad students and our international students a couple weeks ago at the orientation. My main message to them was say yes to everything that you can, because the opportunity to expand your mind and to learn and to transform who you are, especially when you're in another country, that only happens if you take risks, right? And that's what you should do when you're here.
Well, I have to say one of the really impressive risks that you took, and you succeeded wildly, was speaking Greek at your inauguration.
Yes. Well,
That was, I have to say, that was quite brave. And it was very impressive. And I heard from a lot of people it was really appreciated. So tell me a little bit about when did you start studying Greek? Like, I assume you're going to continue studying it. Like,
yeah.
What is, yeah.
So I was offered this position in early December, and I downloaded the language app the next day and started working on Greek.
Good for you.
Hadn't accepted yet, but I thought we were likely going to do it, and it's a very difficult language, right? So I thought, the earlier you start, the better. So I've been working on it since December of last year, trying to be really regular about it. And I've gotten to the point where very simple conversations can be a victory. So I felt really good. A couple weeks ago, we were at a restaurant, and I managed to have 2 exchanges with the wait person before they switched to English and realized I wasn't. So
that's great.
But
that's a huge success. I'm sure they're appreciative of it too.
I think some people are. Some people get a little frustrated because I'm slowing
You're
them
trying.
down. But what I'm mostly focusing on right now is accent and pronunciation. I think over time, vocabulary and grammatical structure, that's harder to learn. But I want to sound right. I want to be understood to people. So that at the inauguration, I sort of just had a few sentences roughed out that I was able to focus on getting them right. Mm-hmm. Rather than I'm not certainly able to ad lib like I could do in other parts, like I can do in English.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that's good for you. It was appreciated. So on that note, your inaugural address was really fabulous. It was really well received. I've heard a lot of good comments about it. And what you shared a vision. You talked about what's happening in the school right now, et cetera. Before we get to, I want to ask you a little bit about your vision for the school, but I'd like to, if you would share with our alumni a little bit of the arc of your career and what brought you here and why you think your arc of your career is important for the role you're playing right now and where you're going to take the school and lead the school. I'd love to hear some of that.
Sure. And there's sort of, 2 arcs in my career. One is my identity and as a scholar and a professor, and the other is becoming an academic administrator, and how those they're tied together in lots of ways, but they're slightly parallel. And so I went to graduate school to become a professor mostly because my experience at a small liberal arts college in the United States was just utterly transformative for me. And I went to college and I started reading books, and you go to class and you can talk with all these smart people about philosophy and literature and science, and I just thought, well, this is the best thing in the world, and then realized pretty quickly, like, if you become a professor, you get to do this for the rest of your life, right? And so I went to graduate school to study political philosophy, and so I went to the University of Notre Dame mostly because it was the only graduate school of the many that I applied to that was going to let me take courses outside of political science. I wasn't interested in being a political scientist, right? I have questions about how people organize their lives, how power operates, how people create meaning. And so I wanted to interested in politics and philosophy and religion and sociology. And I wanted to study those questions. And political science is kind of a venue for that. And I ended up studying primarily thinking about how democratic societies operate. How do we think about democratic principles? How do we understand this deeply contested and impossible concept, right? What does it mean to be a self-governing society? And what does it mean to be a just society when any vision of justice only operates by, making some set of injustices invisible, right? And how do you be attentive to that? So that was, my academic career. I thought I would be and I was lucky enough to become a professor, right? This is not an easy profession. There are not a lot of jobs. So I kind of won the lottery. There were a lot of incredibly talented people who don't get to do this. And so it's, that's probably the biggest kind of, point in my life where my trajectory was changed, that I actually got a job. And so I spent many years teaching. And being a political philosopher who focuses on democracy, well, the thing where that idea starts is here, right? It's in Athens. It's in classical Greece. It's the first place to sort of speak the language of democracy, for all of the flaws and the fact that it was only men and only property owners and was slavery, right? But that kernel of ambition about what human beings could be that then informs, the Enlightenment revolutions and the United States and its best principles. So I taught classical political thought every semester. It was my favorite course, right? It was mostly, Sophocles and Plato and Aristotle, and then, to be fair, you threw a couple Romans in at the end, but it was mostly about the Greeks. And that led to, that was part of my kind of a passionate amateur classicist. And so I did a summer fellowship with the Harvard Center for Hellenic Studies on teaching Herodotus and the Homeric hymns, to add to my teaching. And my wife Susan and I led an alumni tour through Greece, and when we were at Redlands. And so that deep connection to Greece and Greek culture is part of that. And then the other part of trajectory of my life was I was as a faculty member, I have a kind of, as you don't become a position like if you don't have a sort of skill for helping people solve problems, right? And so people were asking me to serve on committees or be on working groups or, run our accreditation and I slowly accumulated lots and more responsibilities. And at some point, I had a mentor say, why don't we make you the associate provost? We'll create this role for you because you're doing all this work. And so I thought I'd do that for a little while, and I liked that. Became a dean, moved to another college to become the dean of faculty. There at that college, I ended up being the acting president for a semester, and then Hampshire College, the position opened there, and that had always been a place that I looked up to as kind of the ideal version for liberal arts education, which is a place where every student defines their own path, their own question, right? And everybody's job there is to provide the resources that the student needs to develop themselves fully. And so I went there as the president, and then I ended up here. So that's the arc of the career that resulted in being at the American College of Greece.
Yeah, and so, Hampshire College is a famous liberal arts school in the United States, very unique. The creation of it was very thoughtful, plays an important role. And you came to Hampshire at a very critical time and were able to really save the school in many ways and turn it around. You're coming to ACG at a very different time. I mean, the school is very healthy. We have a very strong brand. Our alumni are incredible, 70,000 alumni around the world. We have chapters opening up all over the place. Alumni are more and more engaging with the school. I mean, in many ways, we're in a real heyday of the school at 150 years, but there are always challenges. I would love to hear a little bit about your vision and what you want to share with the alumni about where you want to go.
Right. Well, part of that vision is getting the clearest possible understanding of where all of the strengths are across Pierce, Dury, and Alba, and understanding what are the things that we most need to preserve in a time of change and expansion and growth, right? Because it's really important to not to recognize this is this is a really healthy institution that has many opportunities. There's a lot of different things we could do and do well. How do we make those choices without undermining the things that matter most to the people who are already here, right? And how do we make sure that we make those choices in a way that keeps this as a great place to work? Because one of the things and I'll come back to the question about vision, but one of the things that was most compelling about this, about coming here, was when we came to interview, that immediate sense from Stavros, who picked us up at the airport, to the people who were bringing us lunch with Dr. Horner, to the faculty, to everybody, had this deep sense of pride that they like working here, that they believe in this place, that they enjoy being in this community, and that is really rare. It's rare in any workplace. It's particularly rare in higher education, which tends to be a very hard place to work. And so, how do we, whatever we do, whatever vision that emerges, that has to be the foundation of it. And I think that our alums have the same sense. Like, the reason that they are so successful, and the reason that they're watching and listening to a podcast and have that connection back to the place, is because they came out of that warm community and they had that same kind of pride. So that's sort of the first step. Then, on top, given that those values that have animated ACG and its various manifestations from Smyrna to now, what is the combination of economic opportunity, national service opportunity, mission opportunity, and student desires, right? How do you think through all of those, combined with, and we'll bring it all back here in a second, right? Combined with the platform that the American College of Greece has internationally, right? So I know our alums know this, right? But we are the oldest and the largest of the U.S. accredited colleges and universities in Europe, and one of the largest in the world. And we're one of the only ones that has, everything from 4-year-olds to people in their 60s getting MBAs, and one of the only ones that has an incredible campus, and one of the very few of the American colleges that has such a large presence of international students coming for study abroad and coming to study for their full-time degrees. More than a third of our students are international. We represent 75 or more countries, right? That platform to set an example internationally for what the best version of education can be, again, from 4-year-olds to 60-year-olds, that is a unique position, right? And so whatever we do has to live up to that as well, right? So I've got, what do you want to preserve? What are your mission? What are the things that you have an obligation to do because of what you inherit from leaders past, right? Given all that, there's several things that I think we need to focus on, and I'll just give you a couple of the ones that I think are immediately important. We really need to ensure that our international student population continues to grow. So, as an example, this year our entering students, full-time students, the number of international students increased by roughly 25 or 30% just this year. We need to continue to increase that number, both because it's increasingly difficult for international students to study an American style, get an American style liberal arts education, because the United States is making it much harder to study there, but also because Greece needs that, right? Greece needs more people from around the world to come here and develop skills and be able to contribute to the economy here. So prioritizing that is one thing. Finding ways to increase our partnerships with Greek companies and civil society and nonprofits. We've already been doing a lot of that the really good work of the last campaign to support and fund the Centers for Excellence, which are, connecting ACG and our research to industry, to healthcare, to civil society. There's a lot more opportunities there. And we can move very quickly and nimbly to serve those needs in a way that the public educational system, for all of its quality here, really can't or won't, which is one of the reasons why we're really attractive to high-quality faculty, Greek expatriates who are looking for places to come back to, right? So that's a second thing that we need to be focused on. A third, and it's related, is democracy building, and how do we? And this is personally something I care about, but how do we set an example in an education that is about liberating individuals, societies, communities, right? Fundamentally, the liberal arts education that we do here, that is a legacy from the United States, which was intentionally in the United States a reinterpretation of the educational approaches of classical Athens, right? It goes full circle. How do we make that real, not just for our students, but for the impact that they have when they leave this place and they go out into Greece, into Europe, into Africa, into Asia, right? How do they bring that with them and spread that commitment to equality, to justice, to self-governance at a time when that is really fraught, right? Those values are not, there's a concerted effort to push back on those around the world. And that's the core of our mission, right? That's what we were founded to do, for the last 150 years. And so however we think about evolving and changing, that has to be at the core of it. And then I guess the last thing I could say here, because again, I'm going on for too long, is we need to make sure that we take advantage of the opportunity that the current government has provided to have private university education compete and be recognized on equal footing with the public university system. In part, that's because there are a lot of students who end up in the public system who would prefer to be at the American College of Greece, right? Who would prefer to have this style of education with more flexibility, with more support, right? With more access to faculty, with more creative pedagogy, who, because they feel like, well, maybe I want to go to graduate school in Greece, maybe I want to work in the public sector, I'd love to go to degree, but I can't because the degrees aren't academically recognized. Those students will be able to choose us, right, to their benefit. And then secondly, this gives us an opportunity to introduce diversity of approaches into a system that very much needs it, right? To be partners with the Greek public university system and to bring to that a form of education that is much more about student choice, much more about thinking across disciplines, much more about stimulating questions and bringing together different domains of knowledges and approaches in a way that prepares students, for a world that can't be anticipated. I think that can have a really good impact on many people beyond our campus if we can, help the public system see the value of this form of education.
So, Ed, I've heard you talk about this many times, and I really want to find a way to ask this question. But why would you say a degree type of education, a liberal arts education, where students are allowed to concentrate in certain areas but take classes across the organization, why would you say that is important now more than ever? I mean, we're in an era of AI and, rapidly changing world, rapidly changing technology. Why are we so relevant still?
Well, you sort of anticipate the answer in the question, right? We're in a period of rapid change and innovation, where we've always been in periods of change and innovation, but it's much more visible to people, in part because they're carrying the change around in their pockets and their phones. So you think about what are the most exciting, attractive, and interesting jobs right now, right? Those jobs didn't exist 5 or 7 years ago. right? Go back 10 years, go back to 2015. What were the most exciting and interesting jobs that were emerging then? Those didn't exist in 2005, right? And some of those jobs in 2015 that were really exciting don't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
So if you think you're going to go to college or to university in order to prepare for a job, right? If that's your orientation, you're almost certainly going to fail because there's no way, particularly large institutions that have this, gravity accompanying along with them, they can't move and shift quickly enough. And even the places that can, by the time you develop, say 5 years ago, you'd thought AI is going to be the place. We need to prepare people for AI, right? Well, by the time you developed an AI degree, which would take at least a year, and then start teaching it, you're behind again, right? So the purpose of the career purpose of a liberal arts education, right, apart from the liberatory and humane purposes of it, which is to make you a better person, but the benefits for careers are that by organizing education around questions, around problems, around application, by viewing knowledge, by viewing disciplines, by viewing the resources of a university as tools that students draw upon creatively to solve whatever problems in front of them, right? That's liberal education at its best. That prepares people for whatever jobs and challenges are going to be there when they graduate that weren't there when they started. And in a sense, one of the ways to think about education now, particularly, it's become particularly acute with AI, which can do so much of the basic work that human beings otherwise were trained to do, is you have to be able to quickly educate yourself in whatever new opportunities emerge in order to participate in the creativity of the modern economy. And I'll just give you a quick example of this. We have a couple of parents, right, who are deeply involved in a very cutting edge technology, right? I was meeting with them last week, and what they're describing, what they're looking for when they hire people, is that they can't hire for skills, right? You can't. There's no engineering program in what they do. What they're looking for are two things. They're looking for character, and they're looking for creativity, right? And from their point of view, there's an eloquent description of liberal education, right? If you give us people with character and creativity, we can teach them what we need to know right now. And when it changes 6 months from now, they can teach themselves again, right? Those are the things we as employers, we can't teach them creativity and we can't teach them character. We need them to come with that, right? That's what liberal arts education does.
Mm-hmm. So that almost leads to the question of how service has always been an important part of our school, both starting with Pierce and with Debris and even with Alba. And how do you feel about that concept of service as part of an education?
Right. Well, I think it's, again, going back to, I'm harping on the same kind of themes, right? But that is the essential part of what a liberatory education is about, right? So if you want to be a free member of a community of equals, right? That's what we should all aspire to be, right? We all want to be free individually and free together. Then you have to be able to understand what it means to serve others and to exchange value with one another and to be concerned for and motivated to help people in need. And here we can go back to the Greeks again, right? Aristotle, talking about what it means to be a citizen, right, is someone who both knows how to lead and to be led, right? That you can't participate effectively in politics or community if you don't know both how to serve and to be served, right? If you don't have the humility of experiencing the need of help from others and also the sense of obligation to provide that help to people who need it, right? And some of that you can't quite educate that, right? But the experience of an education that focuses not just on technical skill, but on character and culture and the arts, and develops empathy for human beings, that makes it possible to live in a community and be an effective advocate for a better world. That's the motto, right? Not to be served, but to serve, right?
So that leads me to another very important question for our audience, for our alumni, many of whom have told their own stories about this. But you've touched a little bit on diversity and the fact that our school is extraordinarily diverse, particularly in Greece. And one of the ways that we can ensure we have diversity at our school is through financial aid. And across the whole organization, over 50% of our students are receiving some form of financial help. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about why it's important to you, why financial aid is important to you, and why scholarships and giving to the school is important? Because a lot of what we're able to give back to students is from our donors and our alumni giving back. So if you could talk a little bit about why that's important to the education, the holistic experience.
Right. It's absolutely essential. And just to be clear, so people know this, like at Pierce, right, about a third of the students at Pierce are receiving financial assistance and scholarship. Roughly 50% of the students at DeRee are receiving financial aid and scholarships of some sort. So it's a huge portion of our students. And there are really two central reasons for this, why it's so important. Right? The first is that there is an amazing amount of potential that exists across a society. And I think of potential as being equally distributed and opportunity being concentrated, right? And so if you only educate the people who have the opportunity to be successful, you are wasting an immense amount of talent, right? Greece can't afford to do that. The world can't afford to do that, right? So how do you make sure that potential has the opportunity to be realized when opportunity isn't equally distributed? Well, there's one of the most important ways to do that is by actively providing aid and assistance to the people who weren't provided that when they were young, whose parents can't afford to send them to the best quality schools, who come from other countries seeking, to unfold their excellence, but because they had to, flee persecution, weren't able to bring anything with them, right? So if you can provide aid and assistance so that people can access this amazing education, you're benefiting those students and you're benefiting the world. The second reason it's important is for all of our students, right? So part of the experience of the kind of education that the American College of Greece provides, at Pierce, at DeRee, at Alba, involves the building of student communities. Right? One of the things that distinguishes us is that people are here, right? Walking down to the studio today, like there's students everywhere, and they're here on our campus, and they see one another, and they learn from one another outside of the classroom, right? They're not just showing up for the exam, right? And the more diversity of perspectives and experience and opportunity in Greece and globally that you can bring to that community, the more students will learn. And I think, I assume like the alums listening to this have had that experience. Like you think about where did you learn the most in your time at Pierce or at DeRee, right? It was probably conversations with your colleagues, with your fellow students, things that you didn't expect. The more diversity of perspective and background that you can bring to that, the more people learn and the better their lives will be.
In your couple months here, you've started to have the opportunity to meet some of our alumni, and you will meet a lot more. They're everywhere. They're leaders in Greece. They're leaders around the world. They're leaders on our campus. They're changing the world. We're very proud of our alumni. In the little bit of time you've had here and the few that you've had a chance to meet so far, What do you take away from it? What have you learned? What is your impression of our alumni? And what inspires you about them?
Right. Well, I mean, the first thing to say is, and this is similar to what I was talking about earlier about the people who work here, the essentially their universal enthusiasm for their experience at Pierce, at Dury, at Alba. That the you meet an alum, if we have a time to talk about it, ask me like, well, tell me about your experience, right? What was good about it? Why are you? I mean, obviously you had a good experience because you're talking to me, right? And they always have these wonderful stories of how their sense of themselves as a flourishing human being and their success in their careers and in their vocations goes back to their experiences here, right? That they can identify the way in which the person they've become and the successes that they've experienced are shaped by, in very fundamental ways, their experiences here. Which doesn't mean that they might not have been flourishing, happy, successful people if they'd gone somewhere else, right? But every one of us is the accumulation of our own stories and our own histories. And the histories and stories of our alums include us, right? And so that's really struck me, is how much people see that their stories were shaped by their experiences here. But I've also been really consistently impressed by and gratified by the ability and the kind of instinct of our alums to identify the distinctive values and approach of the American College of Greece, whatever it was called when they went here, to having that kind of profound effect. So it's not just that I had a great experience and now I've been this person, this is part of my life. It's I had a great experience and here are these ways in which I was transformed that I think I wouldn't have been if I'd gone somewhere else. So that there's an impact that Pierce and Dury and Alba have had on our alums that is identifiably distinct, right, in ways that they recognize. And that's uncommon, right? Maybe because it's uncommon to have that kind of impact on people, but it's been really wonderful to see that people I've talked to understand themselves that way and understand their experience to the American College of Greece that way, and that they want to make that experience available to more people, right? And so, a lot of the alums that I talk to, are obviously people that I'm talking to because I also would like them to support the college, right? Support the university. And their eagerness to participate in that in whatever way they can goes back to that sense of what changed me is something that should be available to everybody. And I want to do some small bit to help that.
Ed, tell us a little bit about your leadership style. You've talked about kind of the arc of your career and how you got here, but how would you describe your leadership style to those of the people, our alumni who are listening, who work here, or, just want to know how you...
Yeah. Well, I can give you two answers. One that'll seem, that is the humility-oriented answer, and then one that's a little bit more strategic. So, but part of it is I do believe that the motto, right, not to be served but to serve. That is a good model for anybody's approach to leadership, and I try to incorporate that. And it's been my habit, emerging from faculty, being a leader of professors, where no one can be told what to do. I mean, if anybody who knows anything about professors knows that the way you lead professors is you have to persuade them. You have to show them why something's a good idea. You have to, it's not leading from behind, it's leading from within and amidst everybody. And I think bringing that orientation towards as an increasing responsibilities in academic leadership has remained my bias. And so I want to hear what people think. I want to know what their ideas are. I want to know what they value. I want to get lots of different perspectives. For example, one of the things I did when I first got here for the first 3.5 weeks before the college, before everybody went on vacation for a couple of weeks, and then I've continued to have these meetings since. I've met now probably, I think I've had close to 30 meetings with groups of roughly 8 to 12 faculty and staff. Right, people just invited anybody who wanted to come, anyone who talked to me to sign up, and these are great because I get to hear what do people do, what do they care about, how do they engage with the institution. Because you can't lead an institution if you don't understand people's experience of it, if you don't understand what they value, what they care about, right? So understanding and being available to, accessible to people, being clear and transparent about what you don't know, what you need to know, right? That's sort of the lived core of how I try to approach leadership. That said, the second part strategically is that you have to make decisions. And this is where academic institutions often get in trouble, that they wait to make decisions. They delay. They're slow. You can't. You have to recognize that you will never have perfect information. You will never know with certainty what the consequences of any decisions are going to be. That you have to understand the risks and the rewards. And you evaluate that within the context of the values and commitments and mission of the university and what people that work there care about. But ultimately, you have to make decisions. And you have to do it with some clarity and firmness. So, part of what I've been, working through over the last 2.5 months is kind of identify where are the places where decisions need to be made. What are the choices of all of the opportunities in front of ACG? What are the ones we have to focus on, and what are the ones we might have to let go? And be willing to actually live up to the responsibility that's been invested in me, and the oath I just took, on the stage, to say, okay, now we're going to do this, right? And I know that's not necessarily what everybody wants to do, but it's my responsibility ultimately to say, this is the thing we're going to focus on. And to try to persuade people, again, transparently and collaboratively, about why that's the right thing to do. But those decisions have to be made.
So as we wrap up, Ed, do you have a message for our alumni who are watching and our alumni around the world?
Yeah, and it's especially important that our alumni are around the world because, this is an amazing place. And it is not as well known as it should be. And so one of the most important things that alums can do, particularly our alums around the world, is to be good ambassadors. Tell people about the American College of Greece, particularly people who have children who are thinking about going to college abroad. Tell them about your experiences. Tell them what we do and why it matters. And then come back and visit, in person or virtually, to support the place that was so important to you.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for this time. I know you're incredibly busy, and I appreciate you being so candid with us and sharing your thoughts and about your experience and your vision. I'm sure that our alumni appreciate it. And to our alumni, come back to campus. I'm sure you'll see Ed walking around, maybe even teaching class, maybe in the pool. But yes, it's been a really interesting conversation about what brought Ed Wingenbach to the American College of Greece and why he is really the right man for the right time to lead us into the future. We're in a really strong place. It's a great place, and we're really happy to have you. And we'll rally our alumni behind you to help you succeed. So thank you. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Classroom to Career. I want to thank Ed Wingenbach for joining us and sharing his vision for his leadership of the American College of Greece. This is an important year as we celebrate our 150th anniversary with lots of events. If you'd like to learn more about how you can be engaged, make sure you go to acg.edu/alumni. This is Alison Townley, Vice President of Advancement. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us, and stay engaged.
Σας ευχαριστούμε που παρακολουθήσατε ένα ακόμα podcast από τη σειρά ACG Alumni Podcast. Αυτό και όλα τα προηγούμενα μπορείτε να τα βρείτε στη σελίδα μας www.acg.edu, στην ενότητα των αποφύτων και στην επιλογή ACG Alumni Podcast. Μείνετε συντονισμένοι γιατί το επόμενο podcast θα ακολουθήσει σύντομα. Τέλος, μην ξεχνάτε να παραμένετε ενεργοί με το κολέγιο κάνοντας εγγραφή στην online πλατφόρμα μας ACG Connect στο acgconnect.org. Σας ευχαριστούμε.